I think we can start this session with Rula Dawood, right, Gabriela? So Rula Dawood,
Well, it's a pleasure to be in this panel. It's a pleasure also to be able to introduce myself, the movement that I stand for, and what we actually represent and what we do in the Israeli community and in Israel. So my name is Rula Daoud. I am a co-national director of an Israeli movement called Standing Together, عامدين بيحد, نقف معا, three languages. Standing Together actually is the grassroots people movement in Israel. We organize a wide range of people from across the country, north, south, east, west, on subjects and issues that affect us all. In my movement, we actually organize Jews and Arabs, locally and nationally, around campaigns for peace, for equality, and for social justice, in order basically to build a power and transform Israeli society and change the society that we live in for so many years together. My movement, Standing Together, is actually a non-partisan movement. We are political. We are very political. The movement itself started 5 years ago in the midst of a lack of political activism and actually separated causes. And then actually a bunch of activists understood that every time we need to rally Israeli society for a new cause, we had actually to rebuild our coalitions and re-sign our energy from the beginning. So at 2015, we came together Standing Together in the winter. And the main purpose was actually to find a solution for the challenges that we collectively continue to face in Israel. And 5 years ago or 6 years ago, the political arena that we all lived in was very different from the past year. And we had basically, the one thing that we really wanted to do is, the one question is, how can we build a cohesive left force in Israel that challenge the collective idea that we have inside of Israel? We wanted to build a home. We wanted to build a political home, because when you look at Israel, you can see that you don't have just one nation, you have two nations. And you don't have just Arabs and Jews, you have also different ethnic groups, you have different religious groups, you have Jews who came from Europe, from Arab countries, from different places from all over the world. And when you look at what you have in this society, you can find different and various and distinguished people, basically. So we wanted to build a home, a political home for the people, everybody who lives here, for them to come to that home and to feel that they have such a home, to not feel that every time we have a crisis, we need to look around and see who can help us, but build a real political home for everybody who lives here. So what we understood is that during that is, at the beginning even, is the importance of Jewish-Arab partnership. And we understand that there is a very much bigger importance for that partnership in the Knesset. But as a grassroots movement, as a movement that believes that change can be built only from the people who live here, power can be built only from people that you have in the country, we consist actually on the necessity for us to build such a continuous partnership. And this is one of the things we've been working on for the past 5 years, and we continue working on building and strengthening also Arab-Jewish partnership, but also building a home that can be a political home for so many left or people who identify themselves as left, but for the past years they couldn't find that specific home. So this is what we do in Standing Together. And this is actually the movement that I'm part of for the past 4 years.
thank you, Rula. And now we have Avraham Burg, an author and a politician. He was the member of Knesset, and Good evening, Mar Avronburg.
Hello, Fuat Manishma, how are you?
אהלן, מה נשמע? טוב לראות אותך ולשמוע אותך.
נהדר. Well, the topic of the evening is actually the potential. I mean, when we set it up, what was it, a month ago, 2 months ago, the potential of an Arab-Jewish partnership on the political arena for the coming election. With the Israeli intensive political life, I mean, you say coming elections and you have no clue how many of them you will have during the year. Last year we had only 3. Let's see if in 2020 we shall have more or less. But nonetheless, what was looking like a kind of a vision a year ago, and for some others, maybe a wasted opportunity, looks to me right now as a situation in which in the elections we are going to have within 2 months, there will not be a Jewish, Arab-Jewish political party that will cross the threshold and will have a solid representation at the Knesset. Is it positive or negative? Of course, it's a question on the eyes of the beholder. Because if only did I tell you 10 years ago, 15 years ago, 20 years ago, when we started to walk the walk, a day will come in the year 2020 in which the Israeli prime minister will adopt the concept of reconciliation, never mind how opportunistic it is, but a different kind of a conversation and a discourse with the Israeli right-wing conservative majority and the grassroots plus the political representation of the Arab parties in Israel, you would have said of room, come on, it's a no-go. Only did I tell you that all the parties around, Meretz included, having 40% of the first 5, and even Huldai, and everybody is looking for a jewel or a pearl of or fig leaf, never mind how you call it, okay? I mean, you can say, wow, there is a change in the discourse. So on one hand, it's a fantastic victory. At what sense? I mean, at the end of the 18th century, at the midst of the Industrial Revolution, more than 2/3 of the employees at the cotton industry were children under the age of 12. Then came all the lefties and said, come on, it's no good, it's not good, it's not kosher, it's not legitimate. The children will work shifts of more than 12 hours and will be enslaved, etc. And everybody told them, you are Trojan horses, you are well poisoners, you are no good nicks, you are stabbing the back of the economy of the nation, etc., etc. And children's forced labor, or children's labor, kids' labor, look to be a very radical progressive agenda. Now we are 150 years later, not maybe even more, and nobody considers even to employ or to employ kids under these conditions. I'll say the same, a day will come in our lifetime in which nobody will consider to have a political system in which the Arab population is excluded or anybody is excluded. Yes, we're living now for too many years and we got used to the idea that we have in Israel actually 2 houses. One house is 105 members of Knesset. Most of them belong to the Jewish majority. And another house, which has a very impressive parliamentarian or electoral achievement of 15 members of Knesset of the Arab parties, but with no political influence. So we have one parliament of 105 and we have one parliament of 15, but we don't have a one cohesive political system in which everybody participates in the power game and in the influence, in the process of influence. And my feeling is that we are about to enter a new era in which it is possible. In order for this to be possible, we need 2 kinds of courages, which as for now still belong to very tiny minority. Many of the people representing this courageous minority are here in this conversation or our partners in our various organizations, but still it is to be put on the table. And the first is the courage to go together hand to hand, Jews and Arabs alike, with no but, no reservations, no restrictions. We are all equal. And to believe that the state of Israel, never mind how you define it, Jewish state, the state of the Jews, this way, that way, belongs to all of its citizens. And therefore, the basic rule or the basic ground floor should be equality for all. And on top of it, and this is the most important thing, is to transform the psyche, the political psyche of the Israeli society from a one organized and crystallized around national and nationalistic definitions, Jews and Arabs, to a one organized and central, organized and actually act upon around the civil identity of the politics, to move from a nationalistic politics or national politics to civic politics. And this is something completely different. It's a different narrative than the narrative that drove or is driving the Israeli society ever since, or at least since 48. And it's about time to move to the next chapter, to the chapter of Israel belongs to all of its citizens, whether we like the 48 or we do not like the 48. In 48, a new project was launched, and this is a project that Israel belongs to all of its Israelis. Having said that, the requirement, or the basic requirement of these two basic civil courages, the first one is to walk together without shame, without apology, without any reservation. And the second one is understanding that the foundation for the new political action is organized by the civil idea rather than the nationalistic idea should be the working assumption for any new politics. Is it politics is it possible for the coming election? For whatever reason, some of them are good reasons, some of them are bad reasons. My feeling is that the elections of the, and I take it that some of the people here around the room will not necessarily agree with me, looks to me as a very, very, very high hurdle. Looks to me as a threshold very difficult to cross, not because the idea is not right, not because the readiness of the people is not there, but because it looks that our political camp is so fragmented into such tiny elements that the threat of losing hundreds of thousands or tens of thousands of necessary votes to the general bloc is prior to our fantastic, noble, ulterior motivation. Ofer Shelach and the Democratic and the Israelim, and maybe even Meretz a little bit down the road, are really under the threat of not crossing the threshold, the political threshold, the electoral threshold. And therefore, my feeling is that by the end of the day, everybody who is not potentially with the power to do it will have to withdraw. Does that mean that the idea is dead? My answer is definitely not. It means that between now and the elections, and from the day of the elections and on, we should be fully committed to two concepts. The first one is to be the first one to oppose any delegitimization of the cooperation of the Arab parties or Arab individuals, Arab voter and elected in the political game in Israel, and oppose it in every way possible, political, street-wise, parliament-wise, legal-wise, you name it. And the second one is to understand that the walk towards a new political structure with the Arab-Jewish partnership at the core of this structure is not a sprint of a short 100 meters, 200 meters, or 400 meters. It's an ultra marathon. And as the old Chinese idiom is not saying, every ultra marathon begins with a first step. And an evening like this is a very good first step. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Avraham Burg. Professor David Enoch, is that right, what Avraham Burg had already said, that Arab and Jewish people within Israel are equal?
Good evening, everyone. Thanks for hosting me for this. When I don't do politics, I do philosophy, and there we like to distinguish between normative statements and statements that describe what actually is going on. I believe Avram was speaking normatively. They should be equal. Whether they are treated as equal is, of course, a different matter. What I would like to do so I agree with pretty much everything that Avram said. Obviously, what I want to do in my 5 minutes is not to talk, not even about my own organization or my own group that I'm now putting a link to our website on the chat so you can check it out there. What I would rather like to do rather briefly is to start with a few words about why we find such political cooperation between Israeli Jews and Arabs, indeed Israeli Palestinians, so crucial. And then I want to suggest some rules as to how to go about implementing such political cooperation. And finally, to say why I'm pessimistic about doing it right now, though I am, as of Rumi, optimistic, or at least somewhat more optimistic about the future. Okay, so first, why such cooperation is necessary. This is a point that comes up often, I think, and that's such cooperation, Jewish-Arab cooperation, is the only hope for the left. And I think that's true, but I also think that cannot be the main part of the picture. It also gives a very off-putting feeling of the Jewish left, the Zionist left, having been comfortable about discriminating against the Arab population in Israel when the left was strong, but now turning to them to solve the problems when the left is weak. That can't be what we are about. I think that the main point has to be not a pragmatic one, but rather one of principle. If you are really committed to equality, if you're really committed to justice, to underlying democratic principles, if you have a coherent left-wing social democratic worldview, then the need for such Jewish-Arab cooperation just naturally falls out of it, even irrespectively of pragmatic considerations, important though they are. So this is us. We are definitely into this principled reason for such cooperation. Okay, so how should such cooperation be implemented? The first thing is to remember precisely this point. So the centrality of principles is important, not just for why we want to go down that route, but also for how we are going to go down that route. And you'll see that this matters in a second. Another really important point for me is that any such joint work must be humble on the Jewish side. And here's what I mean by this. The first point, and this again follows up on something that Avrum said, the role of the Arab partners to such joint work is that of equal partners, not of people who are accommodated as an afterthought. It's not that if the starting point is Jewish, and then we find a way to accommodate Arabs. The Arabs are there from the get-go. The starting point has to be symmetrical. What this means is that Zionism cannot be the starting point. We can discuss Zionism later on, both this evening and in such groups. We have been discussing this. We have something to offer by way of dealing with it. But you cannot sincerely start an egalitarian Jewish-Arab cooperation with Zionism. This just cannot be the starting point. It can be accommodated. It cannot be the starting point. Another feature of this humility on the Jewish side is that I think we have to be very careful when criticizing attempts by members of an oppressed minority to improve their situation. This is now a very big deal in Israel because at least some Arab politicians are more into working with Netanyahu in order to improve the situation of their societies. And it's easy to, it's very tempting to just criticize them, feel deserted by them. We should be very careful about this, and we should always remember that it's easier to be concerned, say, with the occupation from a nice Tel Aviv neighborhood than from an unrecognized Bedouin village in the Negev. So we should bear this in mind as well. But still, we should remain principle-based. And what this means is that any kind of pragmatic alliance between some Jews and some Arabs that, say, has nothing at all to say about the occupation or about human rights, and this includes LGBTQ rights, for instance, any such alliance is just definitely not us. Okay, the last rule I want to suggest about as how to go about such things has to do with leadership. I think what all of this means is that the key to what's going to go on here, of course, on top of such amazing grassroots activity like the one that Hula mentioned of Standing Together, and also maybe some intellectual work, refining possible platforms. We've been engaged in this, others have been engaged in this as well. But really the key is the right leadership on the Arab side. The danger here, the thing to be avoided is an Arab leadership that either is or even just gives an impression of being Zionist instated leadership. It has to be independent Arab, indeed Palestinian leadership that can stand to the Jewish majority as equals and that perhaps should even lead the political cooperation as well. Okay, so having said this, what's going to happen now? I believe that these conditions, mostly about the leadership, but also about general large-scale preparedness in both the Jewish and the Arab populations in Israel, I don't think these conditions are in place. So I don't think it's just a matter of political circumstances that prevents us from going down the party route right now. We do think that eventually that's the right way to go, but I don't think we're there yet. We need to be careful and patient, not just because a premature effort is unlikely to succeed, but because it is likely to cause harm to the development of the necessary conditions so that maybe success can become possible in the future. Of course, this doesn't mean that nothing can be done right now. Grassroots activities of the kind that Rula mentioned are important both in their own right and also as a part of this large-scale effort. It's also crucial to maintain good working relations with the kind of leadership I mentioned on the Arab side that may make ultimately such a move more feasible, and we've been trying to do that. And there may be other things that can be done as well. For instance, in the coming election and in the immediate work after it, it's crucial, this is again something that Avu mentioned, it's crucial to legitimize Arab members of Knesset. And by the way, all members of Knesset, of all parties. We don't pick and choose the ones that are somehow finer on our palate. And we should require such statements from more and more political leaders. We should legitimize such parliamentary cooperation, even if not in the same party. We already start to see this, as Avu mentioned. And crucially, we should join forces with anyone, Jewish or Arab, who is willing to fight for the underlying democratic principles that are so seriously threatened in Israel, and may I say, not just in Israel. Thank you.
So we are going last but not least, Yonah Yahav. He was the mayor of Haifa city, he was a member of Knesset, he's a politician, and we are saying good evening to Mr. Yonah Yahav.
Shalom and good evening. As I'm new in this arena, you hear me? Fuat? He doesn't hear me.
We hear you perfectly. I think Fuat's connection is a bit shaky, but we hear you.
The rest hearing me?
Yes.
Okay, I'll tell in a few minutes about my little history. In the last 15 years, 15 and a half, I was the mayor of Haifa, the third biggest city in Israel, up north, the capital of the north. This is a very special city because this is the only place on earth which is exercising on a daily basis full peace and living together, Jews and Arabs, but not only during my period of office, it's lasting already 100 years. It started with the first mayor of Haifa, who was a Muslim born in Jerusalem, Hassan Bey Shukri, who decided to embrace the Jewish community, which was only 4,500 people out of around 60,000 Arabs. He was going through 2 assassination trials because of that. And he moved from the place he was living to another place which was next to my home. So I know all the stories about him. I know that ideologically he saw that this is the right things to do because his son married a Jewess, and the kid who was born was sitting next to me in the school which belonged to the Reform movement in Haifa. So this was a very special situation because I got to know who she was only 30 years later when I became deputy mayor. She was calling me and she asked me that the municipality should clean up the Muslim graveyard. I said to her, how? How come this is not a thing which municipalities are dealing with, not the Jewish graveyard and not others. And why you are connected to that? So she said, you don't know that I'm the granddaughter of the first mayor? And I didn't know that. And I said, why do you want me to clean up the cemetery, the Muslim cemetery? She said, my uncle is coming to visit from Jordan. Who is your uncle? She said, General Shukri is the head of office of King Hussein. So the whole setup is throughout years, and we know how to run this arena, and this is a perfect arena. And during my period of office, I built 6 new quarters in Haifa. All the new quarters are mixed. Jews and Arabs are living together in houses, and there is full peace in the running of the quarter. And if it is possible in Haifa, it should be possible in the rest of the country. And my biggest failure was that I couldn't export this sort of living to the rest of Israel. But I'm telling you now, the Israeli Palestinians are going through a very deep and huge and broad revolution. And the revolution is symbolized by the headline, Israelization. They want to become like us. They want to study, they want to work, they want to live exactly like us. And the first sign of it is that the family is shrinking. A young Palestinian couple is bringing 2 kids, and the rest of the money which is being collected is invested in studies and in a huge variety of functions. Not any longer medicine and law, everything. I remember that 7 years ago, I was looking for a psychologist and a social worker for the Arabic schools, and I was I had difficulties in finding. And my wife, who is a professor in the School of Social Work in the Haifa U, she's telling me that today, 60% out of the local Palestinians are students of her. And this is very touching, very good. Now, I'm now working few years on an attempt to set up a party which is a full partnership between Jews and Arabs. The local Palestinians are only 20% in our society, but in our parties are 50. It is based on 50-50 basis. And this shows that we would like to be equal. We want them to be totally equal to us. And I think and I believe and I feel that this is the first opportunity to do this, but also the last. And you see what happens around is all the parties. Everybody is now knocking on the doors of the Arab. Nobody is talking deeply what to do, but they are doing it on the surface of the things. And the head of this trial is Bibi Netanyahu, the biggest liar on earth, but he does it in a very, very talented way. He is cheating us in a very talented way. And I hope that the local Palestinians who are very clever and very able are not buying this bluff. We are now very well organized across the country. We have all sorts of the Palestinian field, including Bedouins and others. And we are very happy about it, Muslims and Christians. And also among the Jews, we are mixed totally with the people who came from Ethiopia and others. This is the last opportunity to enter and to make out of the system which is working in Haifa a political power. And if we shall succeed to penetrate into the Knesset, this will cause to change and to make all the rhetoric into reality. This is the last opportunity because next election, this won't be an issue. Unless somebody will be courageous enough and the voting system will be changed in Israel. But I don't believe that this will happen. Only if we shall be there, it might be happen. So organizationally, we are fixed. Financially, we are down in the drain. We have to do something in order to make it reality and to do exactly like Ben-Gurion said. When he decided to declare the country, this wasn't the right moment to do it. but he decided not to postpone it. So I'm absolutely not in favor of what Avrum, who I like very much, said. Never postpone this good idea, because this is the last opportunity to make it, from this good idea, a reality. And we have to change the reality.
Okay, thank you. Meanwhile, Yona Yahav, and we are going back to Rula Dawood. And I want to ask you, Rula, about the role that can the women within Israel play in the politics as a woman. And I want to ask you questions when you say that you are from standing together. Why we don't see the Arab people within Israel participating in the black flag demonstration all over of the country? Why we don't see the Arab people there? And you, as them standing together, you also participate in this demonstration, and the black flags are a demonstration that hit the country, around the country, against corruption, and especially against Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Why the Arab people didn't or don't share a role in this demonstration?
So I'm going to answer the second question first, and I'm going to go back to your first question because it's a bit easier, kind of. When the black flags went out demonstrating against Netanyahu and the way and wanting Netanyahu to stop being the prime minister, first of all, us as a grassroots movement, was very important for us to actually distinguish that the movement itself is not just fighting to get Bibi down from being a prime minister. The movement itself wants to change the whole system that Bibi Netanyahu actually represents. The whole right-wing people who are staying right now at the government for the last 10 to 12 years. And it's not just fighting against one man. It's actually talking to the people and telling the people that what we have right now, the politics that we have right now, the right-wing politics that we have, does not work for the people living in Israel. And us as a movement, we started at the first when the Balfour demonstrations were happening in Jerusalem. We made our part. We work in a way that we have circles, geographical circles in different places all over the country. We have something like 18 circles, different circles in Israel. And it's up to the activists to choose which struggle they want to lead, which struggle they want to be part of. So we went to Balfour at the beginning. But I think the thing that made it harder also for Arabs in Israel, for the Palestinian citizens of Israel, is seeing flags and seeing more people talking more about the Jewish country and country of Israel as a country of the Jews, and excluding basically the Arab minority who's living inside of here. One thing that so many, as we say, also left people or people with left or center views, when they talk about Arabs inside of Israel, it's very hard to say that for us as Arabs, that we have our own ideology, we have our own history, we have our own beliefs. And it's one of these, basically, when you say the land of the Jews or Israel as a Jewish democratic country, it is not the fight of Arabs who live in this country. Our fight is basically way further behind. It's for equal rights, it's for equal chances in everywhere that you go, for your career, for your school. It's more basic than fighting for the nation, the whole nation itself. And plus to that is one of the things that I talked about at first, is that when we talk about the Arab-Jewish partnership, you should talk about a real partnership, a partnership that sees you as partner who takes also your history, your ideology, the way you think, how you really define yourself in this country. And this, I think, is one of the main problems that we have when we talk about the left and more of the left, Jewish left, the Israeli Jewish left. And this is one issue that we really need to understand how to combat, because if we really want to make a real partnership, this partnership has to be, can't exclude the way I identify myself or the way I see myself. And one of the main problems was exactly of bringing Arabs to demonstrations when you have so many Israeli flags that does not actually, the Israeli flags do not stand for anything for most of the Arabs who live in here, because it does not represent us as a minority. So it's very hard to make, the Arab society really a more relative for all of these demonstrations that happened in Balfour and the black flags. I think this is the main reason, like this is one of the things that all the left has to really think about. What is the real meaning of the Arab-Jewish partnership? What does it mean for us? And this is for your second question. The first question was, I think, about, you said about women in the politics, right? So
yeah. Arab and Jewish women.
Arab and Jewish. I think, at least for me, when I take one struggle and to be more an activist in that struggle, I prefer struggles that talk about women and the rights, equal rights for women. Because when you look at us in the politics that we have in Israel, you can see that you have less women in the parliament, in the Knesset, and even right now in all of the parties for the Knesset, you have less women, less representation for women. But what happened for the last, I think, 3 or 4 years, I can say that in the Palestinian community, in the Arab Palestinian community inside of Israel, you have more women taking a stand, talking, taking their own place, demanding their own place in the politics. And I think that is happening maybe because we can see that women can talk about politics in a different way. It can achieve goals in a different way, in a much different way that men can in the mainstream politics. I think that would be my question, but I really wanted to make a small notion, because I couldn't just let it pass. But from like Mr. Yona Yahav, he talked about the Arab citizens of Israel and becoming more Israeli. And I would like to just clarify one thing. As a minority, as a 20% of the people living in this country, from native people who are living in this country, I think we are way beyond saying that we need Israel and Israeli culture to make us, more educated or more inside of this community. I think we have proven for everybody that we are a very successful 20%. We are there in high states. We are there as doctors. We are there in the health services. We are there in the, I think, in all the aspects of life. So this is one thing that I just needed to highlight, so we can understand that the problem is not having, in the tradition or in the community. The problem is in having equal rights and equal ways of how you approach everybody in this country. Because being a minority, I think everybody who comes from a place where he is a minority, you can understand that there are like obstacles for you. And the obstacles basically come from the regime that we live under, but that does not stand in the way for us for evolving. So this was really important for me to emphasize. That's it for me, Murat.
Thank you, Rula. And my question is for Professor Enoch. Professor Enoch, I wanted to continue from the answer of Rula about why really the Arab citizen, the Arab people within Israel didn't participate or take a role in this demonstration. Is that because of the Arab citizen feel like an outsider or because the Arab people is not really want right now to fix the corruption within the country. They want to make it better their lives in their villages, in their towns, the crime and the economic situation of the Arab minority.
Obviously, I'm not going to speak on behalf of the Arab minority. Also, I don't think that the way you put the question sort of presupposes that there is one opinion of the Arabs, but there are many Arabs, and there are many opinions there, and different views, different political organizations, many different parties, as you would expect, because there are different people. But I think that what this means is that the explanation you are after is not going to be a single explanation. There are many factors here. Some of the factors were explained by Hula, so I'm not going to repeat them. Here's another one. I don't think that corruption is more popular among Israeli Arabs than it is among Israeli Jews. But it may very well be the case that it's less high on the priority list of people who also live in an unrecognized village, or who also suffer discrimination all the time on other matters. That doesn't mean they don't care about this. That means they have, as it were, less free time, less attention that they can dedicate to this. I know that some people, when they voice this concern, why aren't there more Arab, Palestinian, Israeli citizens in the anti-Netanyahu protest? Some people who voice this concern voice it as a kind of a complaint. There's this wonderful democratic effort going on. Why aren't you a part of it? I'm not sure it's a wonderful democratic effort. Some of it, that effort itself is not unified. There are many different colors there. And I'm not complaining about people who haven't been exactly on the benefiting end of Israeli democracy from not being a part of it. There are many fights to fight. I'm not sure this is the single most important one. I do want to, like Hula also addressed one general point. I want to do the same, following up on Mayor Yahav's point. And this may be a touch unpleasant, but I think it's a necessary point to make. Mayor Yahav's party is not going to make it to the Knesset following the March elections. In fact, it is not even going to run for the Knesset, I suspect, because they are responsible people and they're going to withdraw before they reach the disaster of wasting all these thousands of votes. So this project will not succeed this time, but it has costs. Failures have costs. It may make it harder for us to continue working on this for the long term, which is why I believe it's undesirable at this stage.
Yeah, my question is for Avram Burg. I wanted to ask him, a lot of people talking nowadays that the left wings are vanished, and even the center, there's no center, there's no left, you have only right wings. You have Bibi Netanyahu, you have the Likud, and now you have Sa'ar and Naftali Bennett. This is what you have in Israel and the Israeli politicians. Is that right, Avram Burg?
It is right, but not accurate. In the sense, it did not evaporate because it never existed. And let me give you a very brief historical survey about the situation. In Israel nowadays, and when I say nowadays, it's a couple of decades now, when you say left, you actually mean the attitude towards any kind of a political arrangement between Israel and Palestine. And this is not a left position, this is a real estate attitude. A left is a comprehensive philosophy which includes at least 3 elements: constitutional fairness to all of its citizens, secularization of the public sphere, and fair distribution of the public resources. This is a comprehensive philosophy of the left. Such a left was never serious in Israel. When you look at the Labour Party since the 20s of the 20th century and on, especially in 48, was never left. It was a socialist nationalist party, but never with a left-wing attitude. it's no wonder that parts of its voters are very high up neocon capitalists. None of the Zionist parties today, from Meretz and Labor and whatever goes right, are ready to relinquish the total overwhelming priority of Jewish privileges, coming with a definition of the Jewish state, whatever it means. Let's not go now into the philosophical, categorical discussion of what it means, but it gives and it grants privileges to one segment of the society which stands head on against the notion of equality, constitutional equality. So there was never a serious, comprehensive political camp which actually was a good, liberal, progressive camp in Israel. You have variations of national, moderate national, extremist national, and various things, and the same, by the way, almost as a mirror image among the Arab community. In the last couple of years, on top of this lack or absence of a real left progressive liberal definition or definer, you have this stupid, shallow policy of Rak lo Bibi, everybody but Bibi, which means that Netanyahu defines both his supporters and those who oppose him. And this is a stupid notion. When you look at the beautiful, brilliant, shining, impressive performance of Benny Gantz, you must admit that, hey, Furat, woo, hi there, are you still with us? Okay, when you look at the performance of Benny Gantz, you see how fragmented and how fragile is the concept of Rak lo Bibi. It is not something that can actually organize a real political camp or a real political organization. And there will be left in Israel, politically speaking, once the vision of David and Rula and Yonah and many others on this platform will become the political organizing idea. Will it be a small one that will impact a larger, leverage a larger impact, or will it be immediately a larger group? This is less significant. The concept to put on the table is something which tries to reset the whole political order and to move it to a different direction. And for this politically, I give you a hint where it might go, should have gone and did not go. In order to have such a political starter, Meretz, the CRM movement, has to overcome its apologetic Zionist definition that David touched very, I will say, very carefully and very gently. But it's almost an oxymoron to talk about, philosophically speaking, to talk about liberal Zionism. It's either or. And the Hadash party must overcome the communist bagage, which is in a good day pathetic, in the rest of the days is irrelevant. And only out of the, I won't say ruins, but out of the leftovers of both old Meretz and old communist Hadash party, we can merge or we can fuse or we can create a new political entity that will be a full, comprehensive partnership between Jews and Arabs that will impact both the Arab community and the Jewish community in Israel.
Yeah, thank you, Avraham Burg. Thank you for your answer. And now I'm going to Yonah Yahav. Why we need another party in Israel? Why we need another party, Arab Jewish party? We have Meretz, we have another party. We have the Mishutefet. Also, they have Jewish and Arab. Why we need another party?
Such a partnership, a full partnership, which is absolutely on equal basis, which represents the life which in only one place it happens, you don't have in any other party. And the first people who came to see me when the idea only spread around without doing anything was the head of Meretz. And we decided to get into negotiation to do it together. And he disappeared like a very good pupil of Benjamin Netanyahu. What is going on now in Israel, you see no equality, no getting together. People are not doing nothing together with the Arabs, and we have big enterprises which belong to the state, and the Arab can't work there. If you want to have one example for it, is Chevrat Chashmal, the electricity board. And we have to change all this, and we can change it only in one go, and not to wait till Meretz will fall apart or Hadash will fall apart. We have to create something new on mutual basis, on 50-50 basis, which shows everybody that we mean business. And we really mean business.
Yeah, we are going to the participant questions, and we will pick up from these questions, Gabriela.
Yes.
Okay, I will choose some of these questions from these participants, and I'm going for this question from Beth Brown for Professor Enoch and others. Is there a significant progressive Arab-Israeli population with whom to partner if the Proceed Party includes rights for LGBTQ? Can the Arab Israelis accept this?
Here's the short answer, yes. Here's a somewhat longer answer. It's complicated. Most things are. But of course, we have our partners in our own initiative. There are our partners in some of these other groups and initiatives. Some of them are more sensitive to some issues than to others. And if you thought such cooperation was going to be simple, you weren't being realistic. But let me return to the short answer, yes.
Okay, Hula.
Yeah, I can hear you. Well, my
Okay.
short answer would be similar to David. It's yes, but I think it's in the bigger picture. It's more complicated when you talk about it.
Okay. We have a question from Dr. Ziad Darwish, and this question is going to Avram Burg. Do you think that an Israeli Arab party will have its impact on the Israeli-Palestinian conflict?
Well, let me give you a Shimon Peres answer, yes or no. Okay, I'll begin with a no. When you do a survey among the Israeli Arabs, the threshold, the minimal requirement for anybody to ask for the vote of any Arab voter is to have a commitment for solving the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Will it be with 1 state, 2 states, 5 states, whatever it is. But this is not enough. And then much higher on the priority, the 5 places on top of it are the violence in the society, employment, housing, land zones, education, etc. And therefore, I do not see, as for now, and I don't say that I'm happy about it, but I don't see that the resolution of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict as the #1 priority of the Arab population in Israel. And this is something to be paid attention to. I can say my personal position that Mr. Darwish heard time and again, both by Zoom and in Ramallah and wherever we meet very often. And this is that the concept of the 2-state solution is dead. It's an illusion that does not exist anymore. And today there is a competition, not a very nice competition, between 2 formulas of a 1-state solution. One is the current 1-state solution, that Israel has a total control about the space between the Jordan and the Mediterranean. It's a 1 state with 2 regimes, one full of privileges and monopolies for the Jews, and one full of discrimination for the Palestinians. And the other formula of the 1-state solution is the one that I stand for, and this is that every individual and therefore collective between the Jordan and the Mediterranean has the right for the same rights. I do not count states anymore. I count human rights. And therefore, I believe that the minute we shall have a party within Israel, which is based on the principles that Mayor Yahav just described, which is total equality, 50-50, not because that's the population ratio, but because this is a symbolic, iconic expression of the kind of partnership we are looking for, this kind of partnership will be the cornerstone for a larger partnership between the Jordan and the Mediterranean that will become a shared space based on equality and constitutional rights of humans rather
Yeah.
than privileges and disprivileges of one party or the other.
Yeah. Thank you, Avram Burg. A question from Idan Blanc. Why don't Arab Israeli feel represented by the Israeli flag? Rula.
Yeah, I would love to answer. I think we do not feel represented in many ways, not just the flag, the anthem, many symbols that Israel has does not really talk about Arabs in here or Palestinians, because the basic thing when you look at the flag, on the Israeli flag, and when you look at what it means, it has no representations for Arabs, for Palestinians in this country. It's a very simple answer, actually. And I think years of being also distinguished against inside of Israel for Arabs who live here hasn't really helped us to feel more belong to what is called Israel or to the symbols of Israel. If you need any more answers, I can give you, but I think it's a fully answer. That's it from me, Furat.
Okay, a question from Lial Soleimani. With saying that Zionism cannot be your initial position, how can you assure the safety of a democratic Jewish state in this conflict? Professor.
I'm really not confident of the safety of the Jewish democratic state as things stand. We are going downhill and rather quickly. So a major change is necessary. And if you agree with me with this analysis, then you must be willing to take some risks, because without taking them, we are sure to go down that slope. Also, I don't care if the state is Jewish in the Zionist kind of way, but that was precisely my point. That cannot be the starting point, that the state is Jewish. It does not belong to a Jew more than it belongs to a non-Jew. It can be the state in which the Jewish people realizes its right to self-determination, but for that, it does not have to be a nation state or the state of the Jews. What it really has to be is a democratic state. And this is one of my main concerns in the current political situation.
What is the glue that will keep a new party like this together? How do you foster trust and ensure real representation? What will make this work? Yona.
First of all, those who are joining this party believe in the idea that the state of Israel is a state of the Jewish people and all other inhabitants with equal rights. If we are fighting for that, if we are exercising this, and if we are doing everything possible in order to make it the reality in Israel, people will believe. But we shouldn't lie them. We shouldn't do things in a maneuvering way of doing. We have to do it straight to the point. And if we are going to invest in the Arabic education, if we are going to solve the problem of zoning in the settlements of the Arabs, and if we are going to solve all other problems internal, because not like Avrum said, the first interest of the local Arabs is their life here, not the life of the Palestinian outside of Israel. This is a big change. And if we are going to concern ourselves with the lives here, we shall have it done. We shall change the whole face of this country, and we shall keep it democratic. We shall keep it equal to everybody. And so it has to be, because we shouldn't forget that the Jewish people throughout 2,000 years were a minority all over the world. And now in the United States, we are also a minority. And we want equal rights there. We should give equal rights here to the minorities.
Okay, a question from Giorgio Domel. In the absence of a joint Arab-Jewish party running in the march, since only Mr. Yahya fight for the idea, do all of you, four of you, think that that joint Arab list will break apart and possibly lose votes and Knesset seats?
If we are not getting united, like Avrum said, with other parties on this side of the map, it's going to be a catastrophe. And this is going to be a catastrophe which will have effect many years to come. But I don't see it happen because, you know, in Israel, the biggest thing is ego.
I think this one's really to all the panelists, and I think it's a very interesting question and speaks, David, to your points in particular. And the question is from Ferry, and he asks, is an Arab Jewish party the first step towards a binational state? Or apologies, I think Avrum, you mentioned the end of the idea of the two-state solution. Maybe you could begin.
It's I don't know what is the time zones at the askers' place, okay? But at least at my place, it's something like 9:00 p.m. and a seminar about what is binational state. Even David Enoch will not be able to complete it till the end of the day, which means midnight, right, David? What is binational? Is Israel today binational? Is it tri-national? Is it tribal, as President Rivlin said? I mean, it's these are all brilliant tags and brilliant labels, but by the end of the day, we have a reality which is a very, very simple reality. Within the legitimate legal Israel, within the green line, we have something like 80-20, 80% Jews and 20% non-Jews. Between the Jordan and the Mediterranean, we have 50-50, Gaza included. Now, the whole set of questions is not to count how many nations we have. I do not divide my realities according automatic patriotism and loyalty to genetics. My belonging and my devotion and my political coalitions are going to people who share with me the same set of values and the same sets of ideas. So it's some of us and some of them versus some of us and some of them. For me, ideologically speaking, there is no difference between a violent, observant Jewish settler and a violent Hamasnik Muslim, Muslim activist, fanatics. It's the same. And therefore, the question for me is not how many nations we have, but who is a partner to the set of ideas expressed in this evening and who is opposite. And the minute we have it this way, I have no problem for anybody to belong to whatever tribe, whatever ethnic group, whatever religious denominations, whatever faith and whatever creed they want to go. It's fine with me as long as we agree on two things. Something like the 80% of the topics that we can function together in order to improve, and we have a culture of disagreement, how to continue together on topics and issues we disagree about. And the minute we have this kind of a political agreement, we have a coalition, we have a grouping, we have a group, we have a party, we have a camp. And against us are standing all of those, may them be Palestinians or Jews, may them be religious or non-religious, nationalists or whatever they are, who simply oppose this idea of togetherness. That's the way I read the reality. Some of us and some of them versus some of them and some of us.
Thank you. I'm going to give a chance for the panelists if they have a quick comment on the question. Otherwise, I'm going to ask one last question, and I'm very conscious of the time. And then
I would like to come in on this if this is possible.
Sure.
I think that the impression that's been given, but is that an effort for such a political cooperation is at the end of the day, as it were, anti-national. or cosmopolitan. And that is certainly one possible way to go. But it's important for me to emphasize that this need not be the only way to go. So there is room in such a party, certainly in such a movement, for people who do consider themselves Zionist, so long as they accept, as Avrum said, some of these underlying principles. And there is room symmetrically in such a movement for Palestinians who consider themselves to be also supporters of a Palestinian national movement for national determination, so long as they accept these underlying democratic principle. So it's not as if you have to neutralize anything national. You have to make sure that whatever national is going on, it's going on within the confines of the underlying democratic principles.
Rula or Yona, I don't know if either of you want to answer this question about the potential of a binational state.
First of all, we believe in the solution of two states, and we believe it is possible even now. And we shouldn't give up this idea for both sides. Secondly, I would like to tell everybody who listens to us, there is no time. There is no time. We have to push ahead, not to look backwards and not to cry and not to moan. We have to start to the point, and we have to do it now. Even if it might fail, this is a good chance and a good start. And we have to be in this start in order to change the way of talking in Israel, the way of seeing each other, the way of doing things together, exactly like we succeeded to do it in Haifa. In Haifa and in Tel Aviv are the same Jews, and in Haifa and in Akko, the same Palestinians. Why it doesn't work there and it works in Haifa? It's possible to execute it elsewhere, and we should do it, and we should do it now. We should do it with people like you who declare themselves liberal and open for new ideas. If we shall wait and we shall look, everything I did as a mayor, all the projects I came on the surface and I declared that I am about doing, everybody was against them. Everybody was against them. When I decided to celebrate all the fasts of the Arabs, Ramadan, or the Christian feasts, outside, in the middle of the city, people said, you are crazy, they will kill you. No, it became a big hit in Haifa. Hundreds of thousands of people came to see it from all over the country. It is possible. Do it, be courageous, get along, and we shall do it together.
Rula, would you like to do, I suppose these are now closing remarks, considering the time.
Yeah, I think so. Well, it's a really big question that can't really be addressed at 9:30, and just it's a very, but I think the basic of it is that, for me at least, I believe that everybody should have his own independence, the right to rule, the right to decide for him and for his own nation and the people that he has under him. And again, I think there's something when you talk about your own country or your own home, there are so many things that you can be proud of. And one of the things that you can be proud of is actually holding the name of the place that you live in and the name of the people who you have with you as partners, as neighbors, as family, as friends. And this is, again, it's a very big question, but I think the main thing that is really important is that we know and believe that if we want to have a better future, if we want to have a future where we are all equal, then we need to work in order to get that equal rights for everybody. And I think this is the basic thing that we really need to understand in order to continue forward in any form that we have, whether it's for the Knesset, whether for the movement, or any other form that we have in this society. And again, thank you so much. I think it's our closing remarks, so thank you for having me.
Thank you very much, Rula. I think we're going to end now in the interest of those of us who are on the Eastern Hemisphere. But thank you tonight to all of our, and this afternoon, I suppose, to all of our panelists, not only for your participation in this webinar, but also for your continued commitments to Israeli society and to the prospect of peace in whatever way or shape that looks. you know, as Avram said, this seminar could easily have lasted 5, 6, 7 hours, and perhaps this is the beginning of a much larger project. But for tonight at least, we thank you all for your participation and your engagement, and we hope that all the participants here continue these conversations in their own communities. And really, as Yona said, you know, this is the time to act. We have an amazing opportunity, you know, given the current state of the world in terms of connection, and really just to utilize that. And thank you again to our panelists and to Firat for his moderation, and to our interpreters as well. Thank you, Heidi and Lara. And of course, to all of our participants, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me.
Thank you very much.